The crystalline walls of the Galactic Council chamber stretched upward into darkness, their surfaces reflecting starlight from 1,000 worlds. Ambassador Chen Kai stood in the center of the vast room, his hands clasped behind his back, his face carefully neutral. Around him, arranged in a perfect circle, sat the representatives of 23 alien species. Each one looked down at him from their elevated platforms, and Chen could feel the weight of their judgment pressing against his shoulders. He had been summoned here with barely 6 hours' notice. The message had arrived while he slept in his quarters on the human embassy station, and the tone had been clear. This was not a request. The Galactic Council demanded his presence, and they demanded it immediately. Now he understood why. Arbiter Velshara floated above them all, her body made of pure energy that shifted between blue and violet. She was ancient beyond human comprehension, older than some of Earth's continents. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, resonating through the chamber like distant thunder. Ambassador Chen Kai of the human species, she began, and there was no warmth in her tone. You stand before this council to answer for the actions of your people. Humanity has violated the Treaty of Expanding Spheres. You have claimed systems in the Veil Nebula that were designated as contested space. This is unacceptable. Chen felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression calm. 47 years. That was how long humanity had been part of this galactic community. 47 years since the first alien ship had arrived in Earth's solar system and changed everything. 47 years of trying to prove that humans belonged among the stars, that they deserved a seat at this table. And in all that time, the elder species had never let humanity forget that they were newcomers, children playing at politics while the adults talked. With respect, Arbiter, Chen said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Humanity followed every protocol outlined in the treaty. We surveyed the systems in question. We filed the proper claims. We waited the required period for counterclaims. None were filed. The systems are legally ours. A sound like grinding stone filled the chamber. It came from War Master Kreltok of the Kronak hegemony. The massive alien stood nearly 3 meters tall, his 6 eyes glowing red in his armor-plated face. When he spoke, his translator made his words sound like crushed gravel. Legal? Kreltok rumbled. You speak of legality when you ignore 4,000 years of tradition. The Veil Nebula has always been buffer space between established powers. Your species arrived yesterday in galactic terms, and you think you can claim whatever you wish? Chen turned to face the Kronak representative directly. The treaty makes no exceptions for tradition. It outlines clear procedures, and humanity followed them. If the Kronak hegemony wished to claim those systems, you had ample opportunity to do so. We did not claim them because we respected the unwritten rules of galactic civilization, another voice cut in. This one belonged to Ambassador Threx of the Vindari Collective, a serpentine being whose scales shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. Something your species seems incapable of understanding. You colonize too quickly. You expand too aggressively. You show no respect for the established order. Chen had heard this complaint before. In every council meeting, in every diplomatic negotiation, the same theme emerged. Humanity needed to slow down, to stop pushing so hard, to accept their place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. The elder species had divided up the galaxy long before humans learned to make fire. They had their territories, their spheres of influence, their comfortable arrangements, and they did not appreciate humanity's refusal to simply accept the scraps they were offered. We respect the established order, Chen said carefully. We respect the laws that govern it. What we will not do is accept arbitrary limitations placed on us simply because we are new to this community. The treaty exists for a reason. If it needs to be changed, then let us debate those changes. But we will not be punished for following the rules as they are written. Velshara's energy form pulsed with what might have been irritation. Your words are noted, Ambassador. However, the Council has made its decision. Humanity will withdraw all claims to the systems in the Veil Nebula. You will remove any survey teams or preliminary settlements. You have 30 standard days to comply. And if we refuse... The words were out before Chen could stop them. The chamber fell silent. Several of the alien representatives shifted in their seats, their various forms of body language all conveying the same message. Shock that a human would dare to question the Council's authority. Kreltok's laugh was like an avalanche. If you refuse, then the Kronak hegemony will enforce the Council's decision. We have maintained peace in our region for millennia. We will not allow an upstart species to disrupt that peace. Is that a threat, War Master? Chen asked quietly. It is a promise, Kreltok replied. We have 500 warships in our fleet. How many do you have, human? 50, 100? You have been spacefaring for less than a century. Do you really wish to test your primitive technology against species who have mastered the stars for thousands of years? Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative in turn. Some looked smug. Others looked uncomfortable. A few seemed genuinely regretful, but none of them spoke up in humanity's defense. None of them questioned whether it was right to threaten a member species simply for following the established rules. This was the truth of the Galactic Council, Chen realized. For all their talk of law and order and civilization, they were no different from any other political body. Power mattered more than justice. Age mattered more than reason, and humanity, young and small and weak, could be pushed around whenever the elder species found it convenient. We will convey your decision to our government, Chen said finally. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. But I cannot promise they will accept it. They will accept it, Velshara said, and now there was something like pity in her tone. Or they will face the consequences. We have seen many young species reach for power before they were ready. Some learned wisdom. Others learned pain. I hope humanity will choose the former path. The audience was over. Chen could feel it in the way the representatives began turning away, already moving on to other business. He had been dismissed, his concerns noted and ignored. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that felt hollow in his chest, and turned to leave the chamber. The walk back to the human embassy station took 20 minutes by shuttle. Chen sat alone in the passenger compartment, staring out at the stars streaming past. Axiom Prime was a marvel of ancient technology, an artificial world positioned in the void between spiral arms, perfectly neutral ground for galactic politics. It was beautiful and cold and utterly alien. Chen wondered if Earth would survive the next 30 days. When he arrived at the embassy, his aide was waiting with a secure communication channel already open. Admiral Yuki Tanaka's face filled the screen, her expression grave. I watched the session, Tanaka said without preamble. They're not going to back down. No, Chen agreed. They're not. Kreltok was clear. If we don't withdraw, the Kronak fleet will force us out, and the Council will let them do it. Tanaka was silent for a moment. She was in her 50s, her hair just beginning to gray, her face lined with the stress of command. She had joined the United Earth Space Command when it was first formed, had been there when humanity built its first interstellar ships, had commanded the defense of the outer colonies during the Raider attacks 5 years ago. If anyone understood what humanity was facing, it was her. There's something you need to know, Tanaka said finally. Something I couldn't tell you before. Something we've kept secret from the entire galaxy for 6 years. Chen leaned forward. What is it? Project Penumbra, Tanaka said. We've been working on it since the first time the Council tried to limit human expansion. We knew this day would come eventually. We knew we would need something to level the playing field. What kind of something? Tanaka's expression shifted into something Chen couldn't quite read. Pride, fear? Perhaps both. Something that will change everything. I need you to come back to Earth, Ambassador. The Parliament is meeting an emergency session. They need to hear what happened at the Council. And they need to make a decision about what we do next. What decision? Chen asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Whether we back down, Tanaka said softly, or whether we show the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of. Chen looked out the window again at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, 300 light-years away, was Earth, home. The world where 8 billion humans live their lives, most of them blissfully unaware of the politics and power plays happening in the galactic community. They trusted their leaders to keep them safe, to secure humanity's future among the stars. And Chen had just watched that future be threatened by species who saw humans as nothing more than inconvenient children. I'll take the next transport, he said. I'll be there in 4 days. Good, Tanaka replied. Because, Ambassador, what I'm about to show you will either save humanity or doom us all. And we're running out of time to decide which. The communication ended, leaving Chen alone with his thoughts. He had served as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 8 years. He had negotiated treaties, resolved disputes, built relationships with dozens of alien species. He had believed, truly believed, that humanity could find its place in this community through diplomacy and patience and respect for the rules. Now he wondered if he had been naive. The galaxy was not kind to the weak. The elder species had not maintained their power for thousands of years through fairness and justice. They had done it through strength, through the willingness to use force when their interests were threatened. And they expected younger species to simply accept their dominance, to bow and scrape and be grateful for whatever scraps they were offered. But humanity had never been good at bowing. Chen pulled up a star chart on his terminal, zooming in on the Veil Nebula. 12 systems claimed by humanity, dozens of worlds suitable for colonization, resources enough to support billions of people. And the Council wanted them to just walk away, to abandon their legal claims because the Kronak hegemony found it inconvenient. 30 days, he thought. 30 days to decide humanity's future. He hoped Tanaka's secret project was everything she implied it was. Because if it wasn't, if humanity backed down now, they would never be taken seriously again. They would spend the next 1,000 years as junior members of the galactic community, always asking permission, always accepting limits, always knowing their place. And if there was one thing Chen had learned about humanity in his years of service, it was this. Humans would rather fight than accept chains. Even if the fight seemed impossible, even if the odds were overwhelming, even if it meant standing alone against the entire galaxy, the shuttle began its docking approach to the embassy station. Chen gathered his things and prepared to return to Earth. Whatever Project Penumbra was, whatever Tanaka had been hiding, he would see it soon enough, and then humanity would make its choice. 6 years earlier, Dr. Marcus Webb had been staring at his terminal screen for so long that his eyes burned. The numbers refused to make sense. The data from the Jupiter Research Station kept showing the same impossible readings over and over, and no amount of recalibration could explain them away. Run it again, he had told his team for the 15th time that day. His assistant, Dr. Sarah Chen, had looked at him with tired eyes. Marcus, we've run this simulation 20 times. The results don't change. Either our equipment is fundamentally broken or we're seeing something that shouldn't be possible. Webb had rubbed his face, feeling the stubble on his chin. He had not slept in 36 hours. Dark matter doesn't behave like this. It doesn't interact with normal matter except through gravity. That's the foundation of everything we know. But these readings show interaction. Chen had finished for him. Direct measurable interaction. Like dark matter is responding to our test fields. That had been the beginning. The moment when everything humanity thought they knew about the universe had shifted slightly to the left. Dark matter made up 85% of the universe's mass. It was everywhere, invisible and intangible, detected only by its gravitational effects on visible matter. Scientists had been studying it for centuries, trying to understand its nature, its properties, its role in the cosmos. But no one had ever made it respond before. Webb had spent the next 6 months running experiments, each one more carefully controlled than the last. And slowly, impossibly, a picture had emerged. Dark matter was not just passive mass floating through space. It had structure, patterns, something that almost looked like quantum states, and under very specific conditions, using equipment designed based on principles no one had thought to try before, it could be manipulated. Not easily, not safely, but it could be done. When Webb had brought his findings to the United Earth Space Command, Admiral Tanaka had stared at him for a full minute without speaking. Then she had said 6 words that changed everything. Can you weaponize it? Now 6 years later, the fruits of that question hung in the darkness beyond Neptune's orbit. Ambassador Chen Kai stood in the observation deck of the military transport, looking out at what his security clearance had finally allowed him to see. The shipyard-designated Erebus stretched across 100 kilometers of space, hidden in the Kuiper Belt where no alien sensors would think to look. And docked in its massive berths were 12 ships unlike anything humanity had ever built. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Each one was nearly a kilometer long, their hulls smooth and black and utterly lightless. They did not reflect the distant sun. They did not glint with running lights or glow with engine heat. They seemed to absorb illumination itself, like holes cut in the fabric of space. Admiral Tanaka stood beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. The Penumbra-class warship, she said quietly. Project Penumbra's final product. 12 vessels that will either save humanity or destroy us. Chen could not look away from the ships. What am I looking at? The future, Tanaka replied. Or the end of everything. depending on how the next 30 days play out. She gestured, and holographic displays appeared in the air between them. Technical schematics, performance data, weapon specifications. Chen tried to follow along, but the technology was so far beyond his understanding that he could only grasp pieces of it. We started with Dr. Webb's discovery that dark matter could be manipulated, Tanaka explained. It took 4 years to develop the equipment to do it reliably. Another year to miniaturize it enough to fit on a ship. And a final year to build these 12 vessels and train their crews. Manipulated how? Chen asked. Tanaka waved her hand and the display shifted to show a simulation. A spherical field appeared around one of the Penumbra ships, represented in false color as swirling patterns of gray and black. Dark matter is everywhere, she said. In this room, in your body, passing through the Earth right now. We're swimming in it, but normally we can't touch it. The Penumbra drives change that. They create controlled fields that interact with dark matter, the way a magnetic field interacts with iron. Chen watched as the simulation showed the field intensifying, the dark matter patterns growing more complex. What does that accomplish? Everything, Tanaka said simply. Dark matter makes up most of the universe's mass. If you can control it, you can manipulate gravity itself. You can bend space, fold it, tear it. The Penumbra ships can phase in and out of normal space using quantum tunneling through dark matter fields. They can appear anywhere within a star system almost instantaneously. That's impossible, Chen breathed. It was, Tanaka agreed. Until it wasn't, but that's just the beginning. Come on, I want to show you something else. She led him through the shipyard's corridors past security checkpoints where armed guards verified their identities 3 times. The facility was more secure than Earth's planetary defense headquarters. Everything about Project Penumbra had been kept secret, hidden not just from the alien species but from most of humanity's own government. Only the highest levels of military and civilian leadership had known what was being built out here in the darkness. They entered a testing chamber where a single weapon system had been mounted for demonstration purposes. It looked deceptively simple. A cylindrical device about 3 meters long, ringed with equipment Chen did not recognize. This is a dark matter lance, Tanaka said. The primary armament of every Penumbra ship. Each vessel carries 24 of them. What does it do? Tanaka's expression was grim. Watch. She triggered the demonstration and a target drone appeared in the center of the chamber, held in place by magnetic clamps. It was a standard military target. Armored and shielded, the kind used to test conventional weapons. Chen had seen dozens destroyed in weapons tests over the years. The dark matter lance activated with no visible beam, no flash of light, no sound. One moment the target drone was there. The next moment it was collapsing inward, its hull crumpling like paper being crushed in an invisible fist. The implosion accelerated, the drone's mass condensing into a smaller and smaller space until it simply ceased to exist, leaving nothing behind but a faint ripple in space. Chen felt his stomach turn. What did I just see? Localized gravitational collapse, Tanaka said quietly. The lance creates a controlled dark matter field around the target. The field manipulates space-time itself, creating a gravity well so intense that matter cannot resist. The target implodes into a singularity and then evaporates. There's no explosion, no debris. The ship just stops existing. That's not a weapon, Chen said. That's a nightmare. Yes, Tanaka agreed, it is. And it's what we'll use if the Kronak fleet comes for us. Chen turned away from the empty space where the target had been. His mind was racing, trying to process the implications of what he had seen. How many people know about this? Fewer than 100, Tanaka said. The research teams, the construction crews, the command staff, and now you. We couldn't risk the information leaking. If the Galactic Council knew we had developed this technology, they would have moved against us immediately. Every elder species would unite to destroy us before we became a threat. And now? Now we're out of time, Tanaka said. The Council's ultimatum gives us 30 days. We either back down and accept their authority forever, or we show them what we've built and hope it's enough to make them reconsider. Chen thought about the Kronak War Master, about his casual threat of 500 warships. Can 12 ships really stand against their entire fleet? Come meet the crews, Tanaka said. Let them answer that question. The flagship of the Penumbra fleet was designated UESC Nightfall. Chen boarded her through an airlock that seemed to drink in the light around it, stepping into corridors that felt subtly wrong in ways he could not quite define. The gravity was normal. The air was breathable, but something about the ship made his skin crawl, like standing too close to a black hole, knowing that just beyond an invisible threshold, the universe's rules stopped applying. Captain Sarah Okonkwo met them in the briefing room. She was in her late 30s with close-cropped hair and eyes that had seen too much. When she shook Chen's hand, her grip was firm and warm, a reminder that she was human despite the alien technology she commanded. "Ambassador," she said, "the Admiral says you need to understand what we do here." "I've seen the weapons," Chen replied. "I've seen the simulations, but I don't understand what it's like to actually fly these ships." Okonkwo exchanged a glance with Tanaka, then nodded slowly. "Come with me." She led him to the ship's command center, where a dozen crew members sat at stations that looked organic rather than mechanical. The interfaces were strange, pulsing with dark energy, covered in symbols that seemed to shift when Chen tried to focus on them. And at the center of it all was the pilot's chair, surrounded by a sphere of equipment that looked more like a medical device than flight controls. "Piloting a penumbra ship isn't like flying a normal vessel," Okonkwo said. "The dark matter interface connects directly to the pilot's neural system. They don't just control the ship. They become part of it, feeling the dark matter fields like extensions of their own body." "That sounds dangerous," Chen said. "It is," Okonkwo replied flatly. "The human brain wasn't designed to process that much information. During our test flights, we've had pilots seize from neural overload. Others suffered permanent brain damage. One died when his heart stopped from the feedback." Chen felt cold. "And you still volunteer for this?" "Someone has to," Okonkwo said simply. "If humanity backs down now, if we accept the Council's authority without question, we'll never be free of them. We'll spend the next 1,000 years as junior members, always asking permission, always accepting limits. My grandfather fought in the resource wars on Earth. He used to tell me that freedom isn't given, it's taken, and it always costs blood." "But at what price?" Chen asked. "If using these ships kills your crews, if the technology tears you apart, is it worth it?" Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. "Every person on these 12 ships knows the risks. We accept them. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is giving up, letting the elder species dictate humanity's future, accepting that we'll never be their equals because we're too young, too primitive, too insignificant. I'd rather die fighting than live on my knees." Chen looked around the command center at the other crew members. They were young, most of them in their 20s and 30s. They had volunteered for this knowing they might not survive. Some of them were already showing signs of strain, tremors in their hands, dark circles under their eyes. The price of wielding dark matter weapons was written on their faces. "How long before the ships are ready for combat?" he asked. "They're ready now," Tanaka said. "They've been ready for 3 months. We're just waiting for the order to deploy them." "And the Parliament?" "Meets tomorrow," Tanaka said. "They'll hear your report from the Council. They'll see the evidence of the Kronak threat, and then they'll decide whether humanity stands and fights or bows and retreats." Chen thought about the crystalline chamber on Axiom Prime, about Velshara's condescending pity and Kreltalk's brutal arrogance. He thought about 47 years of humanity being treated like children, dismissed and constrained and threatened whenever they showed too much ambition. And he thought about Captain Okonkwo and her crew, willing to sacrifice their lives and their minds for humanity's future. "What do you think they'll decide?" he asked. Tanaka looked out at the darkness beyond the viewport where the other 11 penumbra ships hung like sleeping predators. "I think they'll choose freedom," she said quietly. "Whatever the cost, because that's what humans do. We don't accept chains easily, we never have." Chen hoped she was right. But he also hoped that if Parliament chose to deploy these terrible weapons, humanity would still recognize itself when the fighting was done, because what he had seen today was power beyond imagination, power to reshape space itself, to delete enemy ships from existence, to stand against species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. But power always came with a price, and Chen was beginning to understand that the price of dark matter weapons might be measured in more than just lives. It might be measured in humanity's soul. 29 days had passed since the Council's ultimatum. 29 days of debate in Earth's parliament, of diplomatic channels running hot with messages, of humanity watching and waiting to see if their leaders would choose defiance or submission. And in those 29 days, the Kronak hegemony had not been idle. War Master Kreltok assembled his fleet in the border systems, 500 warships that had maintained Kronak dominance for centuries. They were massive vessels, each one bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust or boil its oceans. The Kronak had fought and won 3 major wars in their long history. They had broken species that dared to challenge their authority. They were confident in their power, certain of their victory. The galactic news networks covered the deployment with breathless commentary. Analysts predicted how quickly the Kronak would crush human resistance. Betting pools emerged among various species, wagering on how many hours humanity would last. Some gave humans credit for stubbornness and predicted they might hold out for a full day. Others thought the fighting would be over in minutes. No one gave humanity a real chance of survival. Ambassador Chen Kai watched the news coverage from his quarters on Axiom Prime, feeling sick. He had returned to the Council station for what everyone assumed would be humanity's formal surrender. His aides had packed his belongings, preparing for a long journey home to Earth. The human embassy would be closed, humanity's seat on the Council revoked. That was the price of defiance everyone expected humanity to pay. They had no idea what was actually coming. The Council reconvened on the 30th day, filling the crystalline chamber with representatives from 24 species. The mood was somber, almost regretful. Several ambassadors offered Chen sympathetic looks as he took his position in the center of the room. They thought they were witnessing the end of humanity's brief moment on the galactic stage. Arbiter Velshara's energy form pulsed with what might have been disappointment. Ambassador Chen Kai, the deadline has expired. Has your government reached a decision regarding the Council's directive? Chen felt his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment. Everything depended on what happened in the next few minutes. He had been given his instructions directly from the Prime Minister herself, delivered in a secure message just hours ago. 3 words that would change everything. Show them everything. The United Earth government has reached a decision, Chen said, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. We will not withdraw our claims to the Vale Nebula systems. Those claims were filed legally under the Treaty of Expanding Spheres, and we will not surrender them under threat of force. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted in a dozen different languages, their translators struggling to keep up. War Master Kreltok's roar of rage echoed off the crystalline walls. Only Velshara remained silent, her energy form flickering with what might have been sadness. Silence. The Arbiter commanded, and the chamber fell quiet. Ambassador Chen Kai, you understand what this means? The Kronak fleet will enforce the Council's decision. Your colonies in the Vale Nebula will be removed by force. Human ships will be destroyed. Are you truly willing to accept this outcome? No, Chen said simply. We are not. He pulled out a small device from his pocket and held it up. Before this Council takes any action, I request permission to present evidence that is relevant to your deliberations. A recording of recent events in human space. Kreltok's laugh was like grinding stone. What could you possibly show us that would matter? Your primitive ships? Your tiny colonies? We have seen them all before. You haven't seen this, Chen said quietly. I promise you that. Velshara studied him for a long moment, her ancient eyes reading something in his expression. Very well, she said finally. Present your evidence. Chen activated the device and a holographic projection filled the center of the chamber. The recording had been made 3 weeks ago, classified at the highest levels of human government until this very moment. Now the entire Galactic Council would see what humanity had kept hidden for 6 years. The scene showed space near Saturn, the ringed giant planet dominating the background. A small convoy of human ships moved through the system, carrying supplies to the outer colonies. They were civilian vessels, lightly armed, not prepared for combat. In the simulation, they represented easy prey. Then the ambush came. 50 Kronak warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, surrounding the convoy. They were not real, of course. This was a simulation based on Kronak tactical doctrine. created to test humanity's new weapons. But the Council did not know that. They saw what appeared to be a Kronak attack on human ships in humanity's own territory. The Kronak vessels opened fire, their weapons tearing into the convoy's shields. The human ships scattered, trying to flee, but there was nowhere to run. In seconds, 3 of the convoy ships were destroyed. 2 more were crippled, venting atmosphere and spinning out of control. The remaining ships broadcast desperate distress calls, and then space itself tore open. The first penumbra ship appeared without warning, phasing into existence as if reality had simply decided to create it. One moment there was empty space. The next moment there was a kilometer-long vessel of absolute darkness, its hull drinking in the light around it. The ship was followed by 2 others materializing from nowhere, their dark matter fields creating ripples in space-time that the recording equipment struggled to capture. The council chamber was utterly silent. Every representative leaned forward, their various forms of eyes fixed on the projection. No one had ever seen ships like this before. No one had imagined they were possible. The 3 penumbra ships did not bother with threats or warnings. They simply opened fire. The dark matter lances activated, invisible to the naked eye but visible to the recording equipment's specialized sensors. And the Kronak ships began to die. The first target collapsed inward, its massive hull crumpling like paper in a crushing fist. The implosion accelerated impossibly fast. The ship's kilometer of armored metal condensing into a point smaller than a human fist, before winking out of existence. No explosion, no debris. Just empty space where a warship had been. The second ship died the same way. Then the third, then 5 at once. As all 3 penumbra vessels fired simultaneously, the Kronak simulation force tried to fight back. Their weapons struck the penumbra ships with enough power to vaporize mountains. Energy beams that could melt through battle armor struck the dark matter shields and simply passed through, phasing into empty space without touching the ships inside. Missiles exploded harmlessly as the penumbra vessels shifted slightly out of normal space-time, existing in a state where conventional weapons could not reach them. And all the while, the dark matter lances kept firing. The battle lasted 47 seconds from the moment the penumbra ships appeared, until the last Kronak vessel imploded into nothingness. 50 warships, each one a masterwork of alien engineering, ceased to exist as if they had never been. The recording showed empty space, the rescued convoy, and 3 dark ships that seemed to have been carved from the void itself. Then the projection ended, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. Chen let the moment stretch, watching the representatives process what they had seen. Some looked confused, unable to accept what their eyes had shown them. Others looked terrified, their species' various forms of body language all conveying the same primal fear. A few looked calculating, already trying to determine what this meant for the balance of galactic power. War Master Kreltok was the first to speak, his voice shaking with rage. This is a trick, some kind of human deception. No species could develop such technology so quickly. It is not a trick, Chen said calmly. The engagement you witnessed was a simulation conducted 3 weeks ago in the Saturn system. We used drone ships programmed with Kronak tactical patterns to test our new weapons. As you can see, the test was successful. Impossible, Ambassador Threx hissed, his scales flashing with agitation. Dark matter cannot be weaponized. Every species has tried. The physics do not allow it. The physics do allow it, Chen replied. We simply approached the problem differently than you did. While your species spent thousands of years assuming dark matter was inert, we spent 6 years proving otherwise. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. Humanity has developed a fleet of 12 warships equipped with dark matter manipulation technology. These vessels can phase in and out of normal space. They can appear anywhere within a star system almost instantaneously. Their shields cannot be penetrated by conventional weapons, and their primary armament can eliminate enemy vessels by manipulating space-time itself. You're threatening the Council, Belshara said softly. Her energy form had dimmed, as if the revelation had drained something from her. You're saying you will use these weapons against us? No, Chen corrected. I'm saying we have the capability to defend ourselves. The Kronak hegemony threatened to send 500 warships to remove our colonies by force. We are informing the Council that such an attack would be unsuccessful and costly. Kreltok roared, rising from his seat. You dare threaten the Kronak hegemony with your cursed weapons. We will bring our entire fleet against you. We will crush your species and scatter your atoms across the void. You are welcome to try, Chen said quietly. But before you do, consider what you saw in that recording. 3 penumbra ships eliminated 50 Kronak vessels in less than a minute. We have 12 such ships currently deployed throughout human space, and we have the capability to build more if necessary. The mathematical reality of that statement settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. If 3 ships could destroy 50 in under a minute, then 12 ships facing 500 would only need a few minutes to eliminate the entire Kronak fleet. The numbers were simple and brutal and undeniable. This is madness, Ambassador Threck said, his voice hollow. You've weaponized the fundamental structure of the universe. Do you understand what that means? Do you comprehend what you've done? We've done what was necessary, Chen replied. For 47 years, humanity has tried to follow the rules. We've respected the treaty. We've filed our claims properly. We've asked for nothing except the right to exist as equals in this community, and at every turn we've been treated like children, dismissed, constrained, threatened when we showed too much ambition. He gestured at the empty space where the hologram had been. This is humanity saying we will not be pushed around anymore. We will defend our legal rights under the treaty, we will protect our colonies, and we will not bow to threats from species who think age gives them the right to dominate everyone younger and weaker. Velshara floated down from her elevated position, coming closer to Chen than she had ever come before. Her energy form pulsed with complex emotions that Chen could not read. You have frightened the galaxy today, she said quietly. Every species in this chamber is now afraid of humanity. Is that truly what you wanted? Chen thought about Captain Okonkwo and her crew, about the young men and women who had volunteered to interface with dark matter weapons despite the risks. He thought about 47 years of humanity being treated as lesser, as children who needed to be controlled and limited for their own good. And he thought about the 12 systems in the Veil Nebula, where human families were building homes and futures. What we want, he said firmly, is to be left alone to build our civilization without interference. What we want is for the Council to respect its own laws instead of making exceptions whenever it's convenient. What we want is to be treated as equals, not as children who need to be punished when they step out of line. He paused, letting his words sink in. But if the price of that equality is fear, then yes, we accept that price. Better to be feared and free than liked and chained. The silence that followed was absolute and terrible. It was the silence of a galaxy realizing that the rules had changed, that the comfortable hierarchy of elder and younger species had been shattered by 12 dark ships and weapons that bent the universe itself. Finally, Velshara spoke. The Council will need time to consider this development. The directive regarding the Veil Nebula is suspended pending further deliberation. It was not a victory. It was not even an acknowledgement that humanity had been right all along. But it was a retreat. The first time in recorded history that the Galactic Council had backed down from a decision because a younger species had proven strong enough to resist. Chen bowed, a gesture of respect that no longer felt hollow. Humanity thanks the Council for its wisdom. We remain committed to peaceful coexistence with all species, but we will defend our rights under galactic law. We hope that will be understood and respected. As he left the chamber, Chen could feel the eyes of every representative following him. Some looked at him with hatred, others with fear, a few with something that might have been reluctant respect, but none of them looked at him with condescension anymore. None of them saw humanity as children to be managed and controlled. They saw equals, dangerous equals perhaps, frightening equals, but equals nonetheless, and that, Chen thought, was worth every risk humanity had taken. War Master Kreltok stood in the command center of his flagship, the Hammer of Dawn, and watched the reports flood in from across the Kronak hegemony. The Council's suspension of their directive had been broadcast to every species in the galaxy within hours. And with it had come the recording of the human weapons demonstration, spreading like wildfire through diplomatic channels and news networks. His people were calling for blood. 4,000 years of Kronak dominance in their region of space. 4,000 years of other species bowing before their military might. And now these humans, these children who had barely learned to walk among the stars, dared to threaten them with weapons that should not exist. Kreltok's 6 eyes burned with rage as he watched the recording for the 100th time. 50 warships destroyed in 47 seconds, not defeated in honorable combat, but simply erased from existence like they had never been. The insult burned worse than the loss. The Kronak did not run from battle. They did not retreat from challenges. They did not accept fear as a reason to back down. War Master, his second-in-command, spoke carefully. The Council has suspended the directive. If we proceed with military action, we will be acting without their authority. The Council has shown weakness, Kreltok growled. They allowed themselves to be intimidated by a recording. They did not consider that the humans might be bluffing, that their demonstration might have been their only ships, their only weapons. We will not make that mistake. He turned to face his command staff, all of them loyal Kronak who had served with him for decades. Prepare the fleet, all 500 ships. We will advance into the Veil Nebula and remove the human presence by force. If their dark matter ships appear, we will overwhelm them with numbers. Even if the recording was genuine, they showed only 3 vessels. We have 500. They cannot be everywhere at once. His second-in-command hesitated. War Master, if we lose, we will not lose, Kreltok said flatly. The Kronak have never lost, and we will not start now because of human tricks and deceptions. Ready the fleet, we advance in 6 hours. The news of the Kronak fleet's movement reached Earth before the ships had even fully mobilized. Intelligence sensors detected the massive energy signatures as 500 warships prepared for faster-than-light travel. Within minutes, Admiral Tanaka was in emergency conference with the Prime Minister and the military command staff. They're coming, Tanaka said without preamble. Kreltok refused to back down. The entire Kronak fleet is preparing to jump into the Veil Nebula. Prime Minister Sarah Rodriguez looked tired. She had aged 10 years in the past month, the weight of leading humanity through its first major galactic crisis pressing down on her shoulders. Can we stop them? Yes, Tanaka said simply, but at a cost. The Penumbra ships are ready for deployment. But you need to understand what you're authorizing. This won't be a demonstration. This will be real combat, and Kronak crews will die, possibly thousands of them. And if we don't stop them? Rodriguez asked. If we let them drive us out of the Veil Nebula? Then everything we've built, everything we've sacrificed will be for nothing, Tanaka replied. We'll have shown the galaxy our weapons, but proven we lack the will to use them. Every species will know they can challenge us as long as they're willing to call our bluff. Rodriguez was silent for a long moment. What about our casualties? Tanaka's expression darkened. The Penumbra crews understand the risks. They've trained for this, but neural feedback from extended combat operations could be severe. We could lose pilots to seizures or brain damage. Some might not survive the engagement. How many? Best estimate? 40 to 60 casualties across 12 ships. Maybe more if the battle lasts longer than our simulations predict. The Prime Minister closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were hard with resolve. Do it, deploy the fleet. Show the Kronak that humanity doesn't make threats we're not willing to back up. Captain Sarah Okonkwo received her deployment orders while the Nightfall was in orbit around Jupiter, conducting final system checks. She read the message twice, making sure she understood what was being asked of her crew. Then she activated the ship-wide communication channel. All hands, this is the captain. We have received authorization for combat deployment. The Kronak fleet is advancing into the Veil Nebula with hostile intent. We are ordered to intercept and neutralize the threat using all necessary force. This is not a drill. This is not a simulation. Battle stations. May whatever gods you believe in watch over us all. Around her, the crew moved to their positions with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment for months, running through scenarios until they could operate their stations in their sleep. But training was one thing. Actual combat was something else entirely. Lieutenant James Park took his place in the pilot's chair, the neural interface equipment descending around him like a mechanical spider. He was young, barely 25, one of the most naturally gifted dark matter interface operators humanity had ever found. He could feel the dark matter fields like extensions of his own nervous system, manipulating them with an intuition that defied analysis. He was also terrified. Neural link establishing, the medical officer reported. Heart rate elevated but within acceptable parameters. Brainwave patterns nominal. Park felt the interface connect and suddenly the ship was part of him. He could feel the dark matter field surrounding the Nightfall, could sense the quantum states of a million particles flowing through and around the hull. It was beautiful and terrible and overwhelming, like touching infinity with human fingers never meant to grasp such power. I have the ship, he said, his voice steady despite the fear. All systems responding. Jump coordinates locked, the navigation officer reported. Veil Nebula. Coordinates matching predicted Kronak fleet position. Okonkwo took a deep breath. All Penumbra vessels, this is nightfall. We jump on my mark. Remember your training. Trust your crews. And if you have to choose between taking a risk or protecting your people, protect your people. Humanity needs us to win this battle, but we need to survive it too. She paused, looking around at her crew. They were so young, all of them. Young and brave and about to face horror beyond imagination. Jump in 3, 2, 1, mark. The 12 Penumbra ships phased out of normal space simultaneously, sliding through dark matter fields in a way that conventional physics said was impossible. For a fraction of a second, they existed nowhere and everywhere. Quantum probability waves spread across light years. Then they phased back into reality in the heart of the Veil Nebula, surrounded by the Kronak fleet. War Master Kreltok watched his tactical display and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Doubt. The human ships had appeared out of nowhere, just like the recording had shown. One moment his sensors showed empty space. The next moment they showed 12 contacts that seemed to drink in sensor radiation, making them appear like holes in his display. "All ships combat formation," he roared. "Surround them! Concentrate fire! They cannot phase in and out forever. Eventually they will have to stand and fight." The Kronak fleet moved with practiced precision. 500 warships forming a sphere around the 12 human vessels. Weapons locked on. Fire control solutions calculated. In seconds, enough firepower to glass a planet would be unleashed on the Penumbra ships. But the human ships moved first. Lieutenant Park felt the battle unfold through the neural interface, processing information faster than conscious thought could manage. He could sense the Kronak ships, their mass creating gravitational signatures in the dark matter fields. He could feel the weapons charging, preparing to fire. And he could manipulate the quantum states that governed the Nightfall's position in spacetime. He phased the ship out of normal space just as the Kronak fired. Energy beams and missiles passed through the space where the Nightfall had been, striking nothing but empty void. And while the Kronak weapons discharged harmlessly, the dark matter lances fired. 5 Kronak ships collapsed inward simultaneously, their hulls crumpling under gravitational forces that should not exist in normal space. The implosions were perfect, symmetrical, almost beautiful in their terrible efficiency. Where 5 warships had been, now there was only empty space. Phase shift. Phase shift. Kreltok screamed as his tactical display lit up with losses. His ships were dying and his weapons could not touch the enemy. The human vessels appeared for seconds at a time, long enough to fire their cursed weapons, then vanished again before return fire could be coordinated. It was not a battle. It was a massacre. Aboard the Nightfall, Park felt the neural strain building. Each phase shift required him to manipulate dark matter fields on a quantum level, forcing his brain to process information that human minds were never designed to handle. His head throbbed with building pressure. His vision blurred. But he kept phasing, kept moving the ship because his crew depended on him and humanity depended on his crew. 27 enemy ships destroyed, the tactical officer reported. Her voice was strained but steady. Enemy formation is breaking apart. They're trying to scatter. Don't let them, Okonkwo ordered. They came here to destroy our colonies. They came here to teach humanity a lesson about knowing our place. Let's teach them one instead. The 12 Penumbra ships spread out across the battlefield, each one phasing in and out of normal space in unpredictable patterns. The Kronak tried everything. They tried overwhelming individual ships with concentrated fire. They tried predicting phase patterns and firing ahead of where the human ships would appear. They tried ramming attacks, hoping that even dark matter shields could not withstand direct collision with a kilometer of armored warship. Nothing worked. The dark matter lances kept firing, and the Kronak fleet kept dying. Park felt something warm running down his face and realized his nose was bleeding. The neural feedback was getting worse, pressure building behind his eyes like his skull was too small to contain his swelling brain. He heard someone screaming and realized it was the navigator. Her neural interface overloading as she tried to maintain quantum coordinate calculations for the constant phase shifts. "Medical emergency at navigation station," someone shouted. "Keep firing," Okonkwo commanded. "We stop when they surrender or when there's nothing left to fire at." The battle lasted 15 minutes from first contact to the moment when War Master Kreltok broadcast his surrender. 15 minutes in which the pride of the Kronak hegemony was broken against weapons they could not understand and could not fight. 203 warships had been destroyed. Another 97 were crippled, drifting helplessly with their systems offline. The remaining vessels had stopped fighting. their crews too shocked to continue. "This is War Master Kreltalk to the human fleet," the transmission came through. Kreltalk's voice was hollow, emptied of the rage and pride that had filled it before. "We surrender. We accept defeat. Please, stop the killing." Okonkwo stood in the center of the Nightfall's command center, surrounded by her battered crew. The navigator had been carried to medical, still seizing from neural overload. The helmsman was conscious but barely, blood running from his nose and ears. Lieutenant Park sat slumped in the pilot's chair, his eyes unfocused, his hands shaking uncontrollably. They had won. They had proven that humanity could stand against the elder species, that dark matter weapons could protect human worlds and human people. But the cost was written on every face around her. "All ships cease fire," she ordered quietly. "Accept the Kronak surrender. Medical teams report casualties." The reports came in over the next minutes, each one another weight on Okonkwo's shoulders. Across the 12 Penumbra ships, 43 crew members were dead or dying from neural feedback. Another 72 were seriously injured. The ships themselves were intact. Their dark matter shields and quantum drives had performed flawlessly. But the human minds operating those systems had paid the price. Admiral Tanaka's face appeared on the communication screen, transmitted from Earth. "Captain, the battle is being broadcast across the galaxy. Every species with sensors in the region picked up the engagement. The Galactic Council is watching."
"What's your status?"
"We've won, Admiral," Okonkwo said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "The Kronak fleet has surrendered, but our casualties are higher than projected. 43 dead, 72 seriously wounded. We need immediate medical evacuation for the critical cases." Tanaka's expression was grim. "Evacuations are already en route. Captain, you've done what no other human force has ever done. You've defeated a fleet that has dominated its region for thousands of years. The galaxy will never look at humanity the same way again." Okonkwo looked around at her crew, at the empty stations where people had died, at the injured being carried to medical, at Lieutenant Park, who had flown the Nightfall through impossible maneuvers and might never fully recover from the neural strain. "Yes, Admiral," she said softly. "I know." 6 months after the Battle of Crimson Vale, Ambassador Chen Kai stood in the memorial garden on Earth, looking at the wall of names. 43 people had died operating the Penumbra ships during that 15-minute engagement. Their names were carved in black stone, along with the names of another 104 who had died in the years before, testing and developing the dark matter technology that had saved humanity. The garden was quiet, peaceful, filled with flowers from every human colony. People came here to remember, to honor, to grieve. Chen came here to think about the price they had all paid for humanity's place among the stars. "I thought I might find you here," a voice said behind him. Chen turned to see Admiral Tanaka approaching. She looked older than she had 6 months ago. The stress of commanding humanity's military forces during their first major galactic conflict had left its mark. But there was also something else in her expression now. Something that might have been hope. "Just paying my respects," Chen said. "I never met most of these people, but they died because of decisions I helped make. Because we chose to stand and fight rather than back down." Tanaka stood beside him, looking at the names on the wall. They died so humanity could be free. Every one of them knew the risks. Every one of them volunteered anyway. "That means something, Chen. That matters." "Does it?" Chen asked. "I've been asking myself that question for 6 months. We proved that humanity can fight. We proved that we can defend ourselves against species that have been spacefaring for millennia. But what did we become in the process?" "What do you mean?" Chen gestured at the wall of names. "We built weapons that manipulate the fundamental structure of the universe. Weapons that kill by collapsing space-time itself. And we did it because we were afraid. Because we knew that without those weapons, the elder species would never respect us. But in building them and using them, did we lose something essential? Did we sacrifice our humanity for power?" Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. "I've thought about that too," she admitted. "Every night since the battle, I've looked at the casualty reports and asked myself if it was worth it. If the price we paid in lives and suffering was justified by what we gained. And I don't know," Tanaka said honestly. "I don't know if there's ever a clear answer to that question. But I know that if we hadn't developed those weapons, if we hadn't been willing to use them, humanity would be in a very different position right now." The Kronak would have driven us out of the Veil Nebula. The Council would have learned they could threaten us into submission. And every human colony, every human settlement, would be vulnerable to any species that decided we were inconvenient. She turned to face Chen directly. We didn't choose to be in this situation. We didn't ask for the galaxy to be ruled by elder species who treat younger races like children. We tried diplomacy. We tried following the rules. And it wasn't enough. So we built weapons that would make them take us seriously. Was it right? I don't know. But it was necessary. Chen thought about the Galactic Council chamber, about the silence that had followed the weapons demonstration, about the fear in the representatives' eyes when they realized humanity had become dangerous. The galaxy is afraid of us now. Yes, Tanaka agreed. They are. But fear is better than contempt. Fear means they'll think twice before threatening us. Fear means they'll respect our sovereignty. Fear is what keeps humanity safe, is it? Chen asked. Because I'm not sure anymore. I've spent the last 6 months watching how the galactic community has reacted to our victory. Some species have withdrawn their ambassadors. Others are building military alliances to counter the perceived human threat. The Andromedian Collective has proposed a treaty to ban dark matter weapons. There are whispers of species developing their own versions of our technology. We may have won the battle, but we've started something we might not be able to control. Tanaka nodded slowly. I know. I've read the intelligence reports. The galaxy is reorganizing around humanity's emergence as a major power. Some of that reorganization is hostile. Some of it is simply cautious. But you're right that we've changed the fundamental nature of galactic politics. And the casualties keep mounting, Chen said quietly. I visited the long-term medical facility last week. The place where they're treating the Penumbra crew members who suffered permanent neurological damage. Lieutenant James Park is there, the pilot of the Nightfall. He's 25 years old and he'll spend the rest of his life struggling with seizures and memory loss because his brain couldn't handle the dark matter interface. I know, Tanaka said softly. I visit that facility every month. I talk to the families, to the injured crew members. I make sure they know that their sacrifice is remembered, that humanity honors what they gave. But is it enough? Chen pressed. Can we justify what we did to those people? Can we justify the weapons we've created? Before Tanaka could answer, Chen's communication device chimed. He glanced at it and saw a priority message from the council station. I need to take this, he said. The holographic display showed Arbiter Velshara's energy form. She looked different than Chen remembered. Less certain, more tentative. Ambassador Chen Kai, I apologize for the interruption, but the council has completed its deliberations regarding the events of the past 6 months. We would like to extend an invitation for formal discussions. What kind of discussions? Chen asked carefully. A partnership, Velshara said. The council recognizes that humanity has achieved a significant technological breakthrough with dark matter manipulation. We also recognize that this technology is dangerous, unstable, and causes significant harm to the humans who operate it. We would like to propose a collaborative effort to help humanity refine and stabilize the technology. Chen exchanged a glance with Tanaka. In exchange for what? In exchange for joint oversight of dark matter weaponization, Velshara replied. The Council fears not unreasonably that dark matter weapons could proliferate across the galaxy if left unchecked. We have seen what happened when the Kronak challenged you. If every species develops similar weapons, the result could be catastrophic. You want us to give you control over our technology? Chen said flatly. No, Velshara corrected. We want to work with you to ensure that dark matter manipulation is developed safely and used responsibly. The Council has never before offered such a partnership to a younger species. But the circumstances are unprecedented. You have achieved in decades what some of our elder species attempted for millennia. We would be fools to ignore that accomplishment. Chen thought about Lieutenant Park and the other injured crew members, about the 43 names carved into the memorial wall, about the terrible cost of the power humanity had grasped. We would need guarantees. Human sovereignty over our territory must remain absolute. Any technology sharing must be mutual, and the Penumbra fleet remains under sole human command. Those terms are acceptable, Velshara said immediately. The Council understands that trust must be rebuilt. We are willing to begin with limited cooperation and expand as that trust develops. After the communication ended, Chen stood in silence, processing what had just happened. The Galactic Council, which had threatened and dismissed humanity for 47 years, was now offering a partnership. They were acknowledging humanity as an equal, even if that acknowledgement came from fear rather than respect. "What do you think?" Tanaka asked. "I think," Chen said slowly, "that we should accept, not because we need their help, but because the alternative is worse. If we refuse, if we insist on developing this technology in isolation, every other species will see us as a threat. They'll build alliances against us. They'll develop their own dark matter weapons without the safety considerations we've tried to implement. The galaxy will become more dangerous, not less. And if we accept, then maybe we can prevent other species from making the same mistakes we did," Chen said. "Maybe we can help them develop dark matter manipulation without killing their crews in the process. Maybe we can turn this terrible weapon into something that actually makes the galaxy safer, rather than more dangerous." Tanaka looked skeptical. "You think the Council's motives are that altruistic?" "No," Chen admitted. "I think they're terrified and trying to gain some control over a situation that frightens them. But that doesn't mean we can't use this opportunity. We can accept their partnership while maintaining our independence. We can share knowledge while keeping our military advantage. And we can start building the kind of galaxy where younger species don't have to choose between submission and developing weapons of mass destruction." "That's optimistic," Tanaka said. "Maybe," Chen replied. "But I've spent 6 months thinking about the price we paid for power, and I've decided that if we don't use that power to make things better, if we just become another dominant force keeping other species in their place, then what was the point? Lieutenant Park and 43 others didn't die so humanity could become the next Kronak hegemony." 3 weeks later, Chen found himself back in the Galactic Council chamber. But this time something was different. The human seat had been moved from the lower level, where junior member species sat, to the elevated ring where the elder species had their positions. It was a small change in physical location, but a massive change in symbolic meaning. Humanity was no longer at the bottom of the hierarchy. Chen stood at the center of the chamber, watching as representatives from 5 elder species presented a proposal for the Joint Dark Matter Research Initiative. It was ambitious, calling for shared facilities, combined research teams, and mutual oversight of all dark matter weapons development. The proposal included provisions to help humanity reduce the neural strain on Penumbra crew members, using ancient bio-neural interface technology that some species had developed over millennia. When the presentation ended, Belshara turned to Chen. "Ambassador, we await humanity's response." Chen had spent days preparing this speech, working with Earth's Parliament and military command to craft a response that protected humanity's interest while accepting the offered partnership. But now, standing in this chamber where he had been threatened and dismissed so many times before, he set aside his prepared remarks and spoke from the heart. 6 months ago, humanity stood in this chamber and showed you weapons that frightened you, he began. "We did it because we had no choice. For 47 years we tried to earn your respect through diplomacy and cooperation. For 47 years we were treated like children who needed to be controlled and limited. And when we claimed territory that was legally ours under the Treaty of Expanding Spheres, we were threatened with military action." He looked around at the assembled representatives. "We could have backed down. We could have accepted our place as junior members of this community, always asking permission, always accepting limits. But humanity has never been good at accepting chains, so we built weapons that would force you to take us seriously. And in the Battle of Crimson Vale, we proved that those weapons worked. But victory came at a cost," Chen continued. 43 people died operating those weapons. 72 more were seriously injured. And in the 6 months since, I've watched how the galaxy has reacted to our emergence as a power. Some of you are afraid. Some of you are angry. Some of you are planning how to counter the threat we represent." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The Council offers us a partnership, a chance to work together to make dark matter technology safer and prevent its proliferation. Some of my colleagues believe we should refuse. They argue that accepting your help means accepting your control, that we should maintain our independence no matter the cost. But I've spent 6 months thinking about the price of that independence. I've visited the medical facilities where our injured crew members are being treated. I've looked at the wall of names of those who died developing and using this technology, and I've realized that power without purpose is just destruction. We didn't develop these weapons to dominate others. We developed them to protect ourselves, to ensure that humanity would never be vulnerable to the whims of elder species again." Chen's voice grew stronger, So yes, we accept your partnership. But we accept it on specific terms. Human sovereignty over our territory remains absolute. Technology sharing is mutual and transparent. The Penumbra fleet remains under sole human command, and any joint research initiative includes provisions for other younger species to participate, because we don't want to become the next dominant force that treats others the way we were treated. We learned something in the past 6 months, he concluded. We learned that respect can be earned through strength. But we also learned that strength without wisdom is just tyranny. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We want to live in a galaxy where every species, young or old, powerful or weak, is treated with dignity and respect. If this partnership can help create that kind of galaxy, then we're willing to try. The chamber was silent when he finished. Then Velshara's energy form pulsed with what might have been approval. The Council accepts your terms, Ambassador. Let this be the beginning of a new era in galactic relations. 20 years later, Captain Sarah Okonkwo stood on the observation deck of the Nightfall, now serving as her flagship of the joint Human Galactic Dark Matter Research Fleet. The ship had been rebuilt, incorporating technology from a dozen different species. The neural interface that had nearly killed Lieutenant Park had been replaced with bioneural systems that reduced strain by 97%. The casualty rate for dark matter operations had dropped from 40% to 3%. It was still too high. Every loss still hurt, but it was better. Park himself stood beside her, now serving as the chief instructor for new dark matter interface operators. The seizures had been controlled with medical treatment. The memory loss had been partially reversed. He would never fully recover from what he had sacrificed in the Battle of Crimson Vale, but he had found purpose in teaching others how to operate the technology safely. New class of trainees reporting next week, Park said. Mixed species group this time. Humans, Vindari, Luminar, even a couple of young Kronak. Kronak? Okonkwo asked in surprise. Things have changed, Park said with a slight smile. After we defeated their fleet, the younger generation of Kronak started questioning their traditions. Some of them see humanity's success and want to understand how we did it. The War Master's son is in the new class, actually. Says he wants to learn from the species that taught his father humility. Okonkwo thought about that 15-minute battle 20 years ago. About the Kronak ships collapsing into nothing under the dark matter lances. About her crew dying from neural feedback. About War Master Kreltalk's hollow voice as he surrendered. It had been brutal and terrible and necessary, but perhaps some good had come from it after all. Her communication device chimed, showing a message from Ambassador Chen Kai. He was retiring after 30 years of service, and he wanted her to know that his last act as ambassador had been to propose the expansion of the Dark Matter Research Initiative to include open enrollment for all species, not just those with council approval. The proposal had passed unanimously. Okonkwo smiled as she read the message. Chen had been right all those years ago. Power without purpose was just destruction. But power used wisely, power shared carefully, power directed toward building something better than what came before, that could change everything. She looked out at the stars, at the galaxy that humanity had fought so hard to survive in. They had built weapons that bent the universe itself to their will. They had proven that youth and determination could overcome age and arrogance. They had earned their place among the elder species through strength and sacrifice, but more importantly, they had used that strength to make things better. Not just for humanity, but for everyone. Admiral Tanaka's words from 20 years ago echoed in her memory. We didn't win the right to stand alone. We won the right to stand as equals. And in standing as equals, humanity had helped reshape what that equality meant. The galaxy was still dangerous. There were still conflicts, still species who sought dominance, still problems that could not be solved with dark matter weapons or technological innovation. But it was better than it had been. More just, more fair. More willing to give younger species a chance to prove themselves without demanding they bow first. The Battle of Crimson Vale had been 20 years ago. 43 people had died that day, and 104 more before that. Their names were carved in stone on Earth, remembered and honored. They had paid the price for humanity's freedom, for the right to exist as equals among the stars. Okonkwo hoped they would have been proud of what humanity had built with that freedom. In the Galactic Council chamber, now expanded to include seats for 15 additional species who had been granted equal status in the 20 years since humanity's emergence. Velshara floated above the assembled representatives and allowed herself something she rarely permitted. Hope. She had watched the rise and fall of 100 species over her long existence. She had seen civilizations that achieved greatness and then collapsed into tyranny. She had seen younger species crushed by elder powers who feared change. She had seen the cycle repeat again and again, violence and domination and fear. But perhaps, just perhaps, humanity had broken that cycle. They had achieved power not through conquest but through innovation. They had used that power not to dominate but to build partnerships. They had suffered greatly in the process, had paid prices that would haunt their species for generations. But they had emerged from their trial with their values intact, their compassion strengthened rather than diminished by their ordeal. The age of the ancients was ending, Velshara thought. The old hierarchies, the old assumptions about which species deserved power and which deserved subordination, were crumbling. In their place, something new was being built. Something better. Perhaps it should end, she decided. Perhaps it was time. Back on Earth, in the memorial garden where the names of the fallen were carved in black stone, new flowers bloomed. They were brought by children too young to remember the Battle of Crimson Vale, planted by families who had never known the fear of the Kronak threat. The garden had become a place not just of mourning but of celebration. A reminder of what humanity had overcome and what they had chosen to become in the aftermath. Dr. Marcus Webb, now elderly and retired, visited the garden once a month. His discovery of dark matter manipulation had changed everything, had given humanity the power to stand against species that had ruled for millennia. But it had also cost lives, had created weapons that terrified the galaxy, had forced impossible choices on people too young to carry such burdens. He often wondered if he should have buried his findings, should have destroyed the research that led to the Penumbra ships. But then he would see human families on colony worlds in the Vale Nebula, living free lives under their own laws. He would read about joint research initiatives that included species from across the galaxy, working together instead of fighting for dominance. He would hear stories about young people from a dozen different species training together, learning together, building friendships that crossed the ancient divides. And he would think that maybe, just maybe, the cost had been worth paying. Lieutenant Park often joined him on these visits. They would walk together through the garden, two men who had given different pieces of themselves to humanity's future. Webb had given his brilliance, his discovery, his moral burden of creating weapons of unimaginable power. Park had given his health, his youth, his very mind to operating those weapons in humanity's darkest hour. "Do you regret it?" Webb asked during one of their walks. "What you sacrificed?" Park was quiet for a long time, looking at the names on the wall. Some of them had been his friends, people he had trained with, laughed with, died beside. "Every day," he said finally, "I regret the people we lost. I regret the pain we caused. I regret that we had to build weapons like that in the first place. But I don't regret standing up," Park said firmly. "I don't regret refusing to back down when the Kronak threatened us. I don't regret proving that humanity deserved respect. If we hadn't done what we did, where would we be now? Still bowing to the council, still accepting limits, still being treated like children who needed to be managed." He touched his temple, where the scars from the neural interface were still visible. "This is the price I paid for freedom. Not just my freedom, but freedom for every human born after me. Freedom to explore, to build, to dream, to reach for the stars without asking permission. Is that worth permanent brain damage and seizures I'll deal with for the rest of my life?" He smiled slightly. "Ask me on a good day and I'll say yes. Ask me when the seizures are bad and I'll say I don't know. But ask me if I'd make the same choice again, knowing everything I know now, and the answer is always yes." Webb nodded slowly. "I think about the weapons we built. The dark matter lances that can collapse ships into singularities. The quantum drives that can tear through space-time. We created things that should never exist. Things that bend the fundamental rules of the universe. And I wonder if we've opened a door that can never be closed." "Maybe we have," Park said. "But would leaving it closed have been better? The galaxy wasn't peaceful before we arrived. The elder species maintained their dominance through threat and intimidation. They had their own weapons, their own ways of crushing anyone who challenged them. We just leveled the playing field, did we?" Webb asked. "Or did we escalate things to a point where the next war, if it comes, will be even more destructive?" Park looked at the memorial wall, at all those names. "I don't know," he admitted. "Nobody knows. We made the best choices we could with the information we had. We tried to use our power responsibly. We shared our technology instead of hoarding it. We built partnerships instead of an empire. That has to count for something. In the Vale Nebula, the 12 systems humanity had fought to keep were thriving. Cities had been built on worlds that had been empty rock 20 years ago. Children played in parks under alien suns. Farmers grew earth crops in alien soil, adapting and evolving, creating something new that was neither purely human nor purely alien, but a blend of both. The colonists knew their history. They knew that people had died so they could build these homes. They knew that their parents' generation had faced extinction and had chosen to fight rather than submit. Every child learned about the Battle of Crimson Vale in school, learned about the 43 names and what their sacrifice had meant. And every year, on the anniversary of the battle, the colonies held memorial services. They lit candles in the darkness, one for each of the fallen. They told stories about what life had been like before, when humanity was weak and afraid and desperate for acceptance. And they told stories about what life was like now, when humanity stood as equals among the stars. The stories always ended the same way. They died so we could be free. We lived to honor their sacrifice. In the joint research facility orbiting a neutral world between human and Vindari space, scientists from 20 different species worked side by side. They were improving dark matter manipulation technology, making it safer, more efficient, more reliable. The neural feedback that had killed so many early operators was being reduced with each new generation of interface equipment. Some argued they should abandon dark matter weapons entirely, that the cost in lives and suffering was too high. But others pointed out that the weapons existed now, that knowledge could not be unlearned. Better to make them safer, they argued, than to pretend they didn't exist. The debate continued as it had for 20 years, and probably would for 20 more. There were no easy answers. There never had been, but in the meantime, the work continued. Young engineers learned from old veterans. Different species shared techniques and insights that no single civilization could have developed alone. And slowly, carefully, they built something that might eventually become truly safe, or at least safer than what had come before. Ambassador Chen Kai spent his retirement writing. He was compiling a history of humanity's first 50 years in the galactic community, from first contact through the Battle of Crimson Vale and beyond. It was difficult work, forcing him to relive decisions that still haunted him, to examine choices that had no clear right or wrong answers. He interviewed everyone he could find who had been involved. Admiral Tanaka, now also retired, who talked about the impossible burden of commanding weapons that killed their own operators. Captain Okonkwo, who described what it felt like to watch her crew die while victory was being achieved. Dr. Webb, who wrestled with the moral implications of his discovery. Lieutenant Park, who lived every day with the consequences of his sacrifice. And the families of the fallen, who had lost sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, friends and lovers to humanity's desperate gamble for survival. The book would be called The Price of Equality, and Chen hoped it would serve as both a memorial and a warning. A memorial to those who had paid the cost, a warning to future generations about the true expense of power. In his introduction, he wrote, "We won our place among the stars through strength and sacrifice. We proved that youth and determination could overcome age and arrogance. We forced the galaxy to treat us as equals rather than children. But we must never forget what that equality cost. We must never forget the 43 names, and the 104 before them. We must never forget that power without wisdom is tyranny, and that strength without compassion is cruelty. We fought for the right to be free. Now we must earn the right to be worthy of that freedom." 20 years after the battle, the galaxy was different. Not perfect, not peaceful, but different in ways that mattered. Younger species were no longer automatically dismissed. The Treaty of Expanding Spheres was enforced fairly instead of being ignored when convenient for elder species. The Council had been reformed to give more representation to newer members. And humanity, the species that had arrived yesterday in galactic terms, had become one of the voices that others listened to. Not because they were the oldest, not because they were the wisest, but because they had proven they would stand up for what they believed in, even when the cost was terrible. Even when the price seemed too high, even when backing down would have been easier and safer and more comfortable. Captain Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Nightfall. now more a research vessel than a warship, and thought about the long journey from that desperate 15-minute battle to where humanity stood today. The ship still carried its dark matter lances, still maintained its quantum drives and phase shift capabilities. But they hadn't been fired in anger in 20 years. She hoped they never would be again. But if they were needed, if some new threat emerged, if humanity's freedom was challenged once more, she knew the Penumbra fleet would be ready. The crews were better trained now, better protected, better prepared for the strain of operating dark matter weapons. They wouldn't pay the same terrible price her generation had paid, or at least, the price would be lower. Her communication console chimed with a message from Earth. The latest class of dark matter interface operators had graduated from training. 43 new pilots, one for each of the fallen from the Battle of Crimson Vale. It was a tradition that had emerged over the years, ensuring that the number of trained operators always honored those who had died earning humanity's freedom. Okonkwo approved the message and forwarded the new assignments. Then she turned back to the viewport, looking out at the stars that humanity had fought so hard to claim as their own. Somewhere out there, in colonies and cities and ships scattered across hundreds of light years, 8 billion humans lived their lives. Most of them would never know the names of the people who had died to protect them. Most of them would never understand the impossible choices that had been made on their behalf. Most of them would simply live, work, love, dream, and die under the stars, taking their freedom for granted the way children take their parents' sacrifices for granted. And that was okay, Okonkwo thought. That was the whole point. They had fought so that future generations wouldn't have to. They had paid the price so that others could live free. The memorial garden would remember. The history books would remember. And people like her, the ones who had been there, who had lived through those desperate days, would remember. That was enough. In the Galactic Council chamber, Velshara prepared to step down from her position as arbiter. She had served for longer than some species had existed, had guided the Council through crisis after crisis, but her time was ending. The galaxy was changing, and it needed leadership that understood that change, that embraced it rather than feared it. Her replacement would be younger, only a few thousand years old instead of millions, young enough to remember what it felt like to be dismissed, to be told to wait your turn, to be treated as lesser simply because of age, young enough to understand why humanity had been willing to risk everything rather than accept that treatment as Velshara floated above the council chamber for the last time. She looked at the representatives below, so many species, so many different forms of life, all trying to coexist in a galaxy that offered more than enough room for everyone, if they could just learn to share it. Humanity had taught them that sharing didn't mean submission, that equality couldn't be given, only taken. That respect was earned through action, not granted through permission. They were hard lessons, learned at a cost that still haunted everyone involved. But they were necessary lessons. The age of the ancients was over. A new age had begun, and though Velshara would not be there to see where it led, she allowed herself to hope that it would be better than what had come before. Because if nothing else, humanity had proven that even the youngest species could change the galaxy, if they were willing to pay the price, if they were brave, enough to stand when it would have been easier to kneel. If they remembered that power was a responsibility, not just a weapon. The future was uncertain. It always had been. But for the first time in Velshara's long existence, that uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat, and that, she thought as she prepared to leave the council chamber for the final time, was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not dark matter weapons or quantum drives or technology that bent the universe itself, but hope. Hope that things could be better. Hope that change was possible. Hope that tomorrow might be different from yesterday, if people were willing to fight for it. The Galactic Council fell silent that day 20 years ago. And when the silence ended, the galaxy had changed forever. For better or worse, for good or ill, for triumph or tragedy, humanity had made its mark on the stars, and the universe would never be the same.